Welcome to Zcast, everybody. I'm Zias Caravallo from ZK Research. I'm your host, and I'm here for another one of my thought leadership Zcast, in which I interview smart people from different companies, and we talk about different trends in the industry. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Mark Wayland, Chief Revenue Officer at Box. Mark, why don't you say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Box?
Great. Thanks for having me. Honored to be on the Zcast. And so I'm Mark Wayland. I'm Chief Revenue Officer at Box. And in my role, I'm responsible for sales, channels, solutions engineering, a lot of the management of our customer relationships around the world, and just hit my 2-year anniversary. And great to be here today.
Well, congratulations on 2 years. It seems like you got a big role there. Before we get into the Q&A, though, I do want to just give a quick shout out to eWeek, who's my media partner. This Zcast are done in conjunction with the eWeek He Speaks program. So thank you very much, eWeek. Now, Mark, in recent months, I've noticed Box has been changing its positioning somewhat, referring to itself as a content cloud. Can you explain what the Box Content Cloud is?
Yeah, well, it really is about the evolution of the company. You know, we're a 15, 16-year-old company, went public about 6 years ago. And it's really about the evolution of the platform, you know, really starting from how can I store and collaborate on my content on the internet into really proliferation of SaaS applications over this last decade plus to this new world where governance, security, compliance are paramount. And all of this has been accelerated with this remote work trend and changing really the way that people work. And so we did some repositioning around what our platform really is around the Content Cloud. And it's just a very simple message that says what it does and does what it says. And very specifically, a central place to store and communicate and collaborate internally and externally, a very different thing than, for example, a personal storage environment. And then really trying to help the market understand everything that would entail. That it's more than just storage and collaboration. It's really everything about the life cycle of content. And one thing that we're finding, and it doesn't matter if you're in life sciences or in media and entertainment or some of the biggest consumer brands like our clients at Nike, at the end of the day, content really is all of our businesses. And our knowledge workers, you know, sort of dip in and out of a number of different SaaS applications. But when they're doing work, they're very often doing work in content. And we believe that the Box Content Cloud is the very best place to store, communicate, and collaborate internally and externally on that content. And it comes with, you know, when you put your content in there, it comes with best-in-class security, governance, et cetera.
Yeah, well, clearly working with content is really you can almost think of it as the competitive differentiator for companies, right? Their ability to do that. Now, I've been working with the Box now a little while, and to be honest, when I first started working with you, I was a little confused about your differences. You mentioned personal storage. I think if people that don't really know the space very well might think you as, you know, lumping you in that bucket with the myriad of other cloud offerings. And there's a number that are, you know, personal consumer. There's some that focus on corporate. But how does what you do differ from the other business class cloud offerings, such as a Onedrive or a Google Drive, which, you know, in a lot of cases are free or low cost, things like that. But I consider you a best-in-class company. So I'd like to get your thought on how you differ from those.
Yeah, well, virtually every one of our customers either has G Drive or OneDrive, because almost every enterprise around the world is using O365 or they're using Google Cloud. And so I have a G Drive account. In fact, I have multiple of them because I have personal accounts and I have my business account. Okay. And, you know, those solutions are really good for personal storage. They're not typically very good for collaborating around content, and they're not typically very good for sharing content externally. And in fact, many organizations turn off external sharing in those tools. And so we basically are a great coexist tool with all of those personal storage solutions. And I think just to further answer the question, we have to put it in the context of the overall IT landscape today. I'm in my, I think, 15th year in SaaS, and I recall, in 2007 when I started at Salesforce, we were trying to get organizations to purchase their first SaaS application. And if you look at the Okta annual report, our friends at Okta do this annual report called the Business at Work Study, which is amazing. And today, the average enterprise has 175 SaaS applications, which is absolutely amazing. So now 175 isn't too many. It's not 175 too many, excuse me, but it's probably 100 too many. And so CFOs and CIOs and line of business, knowledge workers are fatigued of all the SaaS apps. And when you go into your Okta login page or whatever your single sign-on page, if you have to click through like 5 pages to get to the app that you need, you probably have too many apps. And so consolidation is ripe. And one thing that all of these SaaS applications have in common is that they all spew out content in their exhaust. But none of them are particularly good at managing content because that's not the core function of that application. So we have pre-built integrations to over 1,500 of these applications. And instead of storing content 175 different times in all of these different applications, you can store it in one place, store it one time, access it in all of those SaaS applications, whether it's a Workday or a ServiceNow or a Salesforce, or in Teams, in OneDrive, in G Drive, because we have integrations to all these platforms. You can store it once, get the benefits of the Content Cloud for best-in-class security and governance, rather than having islands of storage across that footprint, 175 SaaS applications. What ends up happening is knowledge workers get very frustrated because they can't find content. And what they end up doing is getting in a time machine back to the 1990s and emailing content around like they always have. And that's a terribly unproductive way of working. And it should concern CISOs around the world because you lose chain of custody of the documents. It can be forwarded on and the like. And so storing in the Content Cloud is really what we think that is the best thing to do, pre-integrated to that whole, all those SaaS applications. And with our recent launch of Foxsign that we just launched last week, back to my comment on consolidation, organizations want to have fewer SaaS applications. So we believe that a Content Cloud should include electronic signature because that's one very important step in the lifecycle of many documents. And so we now have it included with native web signatures inside the Box platform that's unlimited with no additional charge. And so there's an opportunity for SaaS consolidation, which we think is inevitable.
Getting work done today means moving fast and keeping it simple. And with everything that goes into reaching the finish line, a signature should be the last thing that slows you down. It's time for secure, simple e-signatures built for the way you work. Introducing Foxsign, the first solution to offer unlimited e-signatures where your content lives. With Foxsign, your teams gather secure and compliant signatures. No paper required. It's easy, secure, built into the Box experience, and it doesn't cost you a thing. With integrations across popular apps like Salesforce, you get the freedom to work how you want. Whether you're closing deals, onboarding new talent, or forging a new partnership, Foxsign helps you get it done faster. Keep work simple and delight every user. Take charge of the contracts and content that power your business. Learn more at box.com/sign.
Yeah, it's funny, as you were describing the process of emailing documents to each other and having version control problems, I was myself feeling a lot of anxiety and pain for having to deal with that myself. So it is a big problem. Now, it seems like though that Box's goal of managing the entire content lifecycle in one platform, that's more than just storing the content, right? That requires a very wide range of product capabilities. So you talked about the document signing capabilities a little bit, but how have Box's products evolved to provide this end-to-end offering?
Yeah, well, we've been making tremendous investments in the platform over the last 5+ years around workflow, governance, security. Right when I started a couple of years ago, we launched our enhanced security offering called Shield, which has been one of our most successful product launches in history. Prior to that, we launched our governance product. We launched a relay product called a workflow product called Relay, which has been really successful. And then this year, the launch of Foxsign after an acquisition that we made earlier in the year, and we spent the last 6 months porting that technology onto the platform. So huge investments. I think if just take signature, for example, the very important thing in a signature workflow is not the signature itself. It's everything that happens before the signature and everything that happens after. And, we would say that everything that happens afterwards, after that document is signed, in terms of where do you store it, retention policies, classification, external sharing, on the Box Content Cloud, that's best in class. And everything that happens before the signature, we've now built workflow into the Content Cloud. So we can do a lot of those processes. A lot of the authoring of documents may still happen in Microsoft or in other environments, but because of our pre-built integrations to those environments, some of those workflows, those documents can get authored, and then they can run through workflow and through signature, and then storage, retention, sharing, et cetera, in the Content Cloud.
Yeah, now you've got a pretty big customer base, and as being the chief revenue officer, I'm sure you talk to customers a lot. So in your conversations with the customer, what are some of the biggest benefits they get, as they make this transition to the Content Cloud away from the things they were doing before?
I would say that customers come to Box for a variety of reasons. We're definitely seeing a lot of net new customers join our family purely for security reasons. We've had a lot of customers that have had very concerning security breaches around malware and ransomware and infected documents, and they come just for that reason. Because with our Shield offering, we're actually scanning all the documents that you have stored in the Content Cloud all the time, and we're uncovering if there's malware or ransomware in those documents and sending out alerts. You sort of think of what we do in the Content Cloud from a security standpoint as the motion detectors in your home. And security organizations have spent a lot of time and money kind of locking down the doors and the windows with firewalls and perimeter security. But the bad stuff can still get into your environment, and we're going to catch it because we've got the motion detectors on your content. So that's one of the sort of big pillars, one of the big reasons why new customers come join us. And then I would say the other one is really around this new world that we're in and changing the way people work, and that knowledge workers have too many applications that they're working in. They have a hard time communicating and collaborating around content inside their enterprise. And when having a single Content Cloud, that single content layer across your organization integrated into your whole application footprint can be implemented, it really improves the way people work together. And so whether you are sort of a Microsoft shop or a Google shop or a best of breed shop with Slack and Zoom, we integrate elegantly in that kind of in those different environments. And I think that modern way of working is a big reason why customers join as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the changing nature of work, because we are in this kind of a hybrid work model for the foreseeable future. And I think the old way of sharing content, doing the old S drive or P drive or whatever with the VPN link, doesn't really work. Now, the more distributed we become, the harder the challenge of managing content. And I know you guys have started using artificial intelligence as a way to actually make your system smarter, correct?
Yeah, we have a lot of AI capabilities that are built in the platform around security and metadata and a lot of other capabilities, and that's a big area of innovation for us. And I think there's a lot more opportunity for us to advance the platform on that front. And I think that this idea of changing the way that we work is an important one, because we're never going back to the way that we were before. And we're doing sort of some slow opens of our offices, but for our company, because we don't have any client software on our computers, when we were all sent home a year and a half ago, it was no big deal because we already are sort of built for remote work. But many of our customers sort of struggled on that front. And if you look at, for example, what happened with Zoom, it's a fundamental change for organizations when they move to the Zoom world, because when you're in the office, you generally weren't using Zoom unless you were doing some office to office communication. But when you go home, it really fundamentally changes all the way that we all communicate and collaborate. But for Box, our customers, when they were in the office, they use Box the same way now as they did before, because it's cloud. It's a Content Cloud. So it's a Content Cloud when you're on premise in the offices. It's a Content Cloud when you're at home. It's a seamless way of working with content. If you're, on the road, in a hotel, at home, in the office, there's no change in terms of the way we've been doing this for years. There's no change in terms of the way that people work. The big change has been this real heavy adoption of the integrations that we have into all these other platforms, and more companies sort of adopting this idea of having a single Content Cloud rather than islands and islands and islands of content.
Yeah, I think the point you brought up too about your customers not having to change the way they work is interesting, because I've been talking to a lot of business leaders about what the future work looks like. And I said, I have no idea. The one thing I can tell you is that from a business leader perspective, you better be prepared for an environment where everybody's in the office, nobody's in the office, and every possible combination in between. Right. And you don't know when you're going to have to change strategies or when you're going to have to bring everybody in or send them home. but clearly that can have a highly disruptive impact on the workforce. So the fact that your customers don't have to, I think, is a big feather in your cap.
I think for us, like just take video for example. When you're in a meeting, as you know very well, if you're in a meeting with 20 people and everyone's on video and they're all on their own machine, video is a really wonderful solution. But when we go back to this hybrid world, if you have 8 people in a conference room and 2 people on video, it gets a little bit challenging. Yeah. Because we're not all in this Brady Bunch sort of peer environment. And but for Box, we don't really have that challenge. You could have 100 people that are all in their homes, or you could have 50 people in an office and 50 people at home. Box works elegantly in all of those different scenarios. And because we integrate into all of the SaaS apps that organizations have, it's just a very elegant solution that just happens to come with best-in-class security and governance.
Yeah, well, that's great. Now, you alluded to some of the challenges companies have when they have information scattered across multiple systems, emailing back and forth. But give our audience some sort of idea of the pain. What are some of those big problems they have, and what are some of the ones they may not even know exist when they have information scattered all over the place?
Well, there's a myriad of problems. You've got a whole bunch of problems around security. So chain of custody of documents. A lot of these documents have incredibly sensitive information on there. If you just think about if you are in media and entertainment, virtually every movie that is coming out now was developed by people that work from home. And for many of our customers in that industry, they're moving those files around as they're creating these these billion-dollar franchise kind of movies. They're moving them around in Box from developers' home computers. So that's a really big deal. If those files aren't secure, if they don't have chain of custody on those things, those movies get leaked and they lose the opportunity to have a big bang when they launch that content. Or if it's Nike developing a new shoe in consumer products, or if it's a wealth management environment in financial services where you're sharing highly sensitive documents like pay stubs and tax returns, you do not want these documents being emailed around where someone can accidentally forward them from their phone while they're in line at Starbucks. And you certainly don't want malware moving around your organization unfettered in email systems. So there's this sort of security big bucket of use cases I shared, and then there's a lot about just securely communicating and collaborating around content. And those are really big areas of opportunity for customers that adopt the Content Cloud.
Yeah. Plus, from a user standpoint, I don't have to track 55 different places where I've stored my content anymore. So my life becomes easier as well.
Yeah, and we continue to make more improvements in the UI of Box. And just the 2 years that I've been here, we've made dramatic improvements to the UI and huge improvements to our search capabilities. We created a new capability called Collections, where users can very easily kind of store data and be able to capture data outside of the typical folder structure. So, you had mentioned the S drive and C drive. When I talk to the younger people on my teams that have only worked with a Macintosh, they don't even know what a U or an S or an F drive is because they've never been in that clunky world that we grew up in. But those things are still out there. There's still file shares. I talked to a financial services customer recently who it's an investment bank, and they have teams in London and San Francisco and New York. And when they're working on a big deal together, they fight over which file server they're going to use, because if they use the one in San Francisco, the team in London has to deal with latency issues. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Are we really doing this in 2021? But it's really prevalent, and those are easy problems to solve with a platform like ours.
Yeah, I guess I just showed my age there by saying S drive. So
I'm with you.
Yeah, at least you understood the reference. So being the CRO, I know you're very involved in the company strategy. And as a last question, can you give us an idea of what's next for Box?
Well, we've got some very exciting stuff that we'll be announcing at BoxWorks, which is coming up here in the fall. And I think what you will see from us is just continued innovation around really two themes. One being changing the way people work, and the other being around security and governance and making it the most secure environment to store your most precious assets in an enterprise. And so there'll be more enhancements on our integrations to other key platforms like the Microsoft O365 stack, as well as Google, Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, all the top SaaS applications that organizations are using. And then more and more improvements on the UI and the way in which people search and collaborate and communicate and work with content to make that experience for the end user just more and more rich as time goes on.
Well, Mark, thanks for your time. There's an expression in the IT industry that content is king. But from an IT perspective, we really haven't treated it that way. So, thanks for the great work that Box is doing and helping us at least move closer to that model where content indeed is secured and protected and made accessible. So anyways, on behalf of Mark Wayland from Box, I'm Zeus Caraval from CK Research. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.